Now that we have our root directory set up and we have our index.html page created, we can start marking up our HTML document with the bare bones necessary structural requirements that make a web page. So you have your blank HTML page in front of you. The very first thing we have to do is something called a doc type declaration. This essentially ensures that your page is rendered properly. So to do a doc type declaration, we just want to do an opening angle bracket or a less than sign, followed by an exclamation mark, and we write doc type HTML. And then we do a greater than sign to close it. Now we talked earlier about the benefits of Sublime. You can see here that it has a special color coding. This lets you know that you have a proper syntax, that your doc type is written correctly. There is a caveat to this, however. HTML is something we call case insensitive. That doesn't mean that the way I have written it is the only way to write it. But just note that this is considered the standard way to write it, the best practice. But you could write it like this. Now you see the syntax highlighting doesn't show up because that is not the best practice. I could also write it like this, and that would still be considered correct, or like this. I could even do this. You get my point. So HTML is case insensitive, but let's just stick with the best practices and go doc type HTML. The next structural requirement for your page, the HTML element. And this element will wrap all your website's content. These HTML tags tell your browser where your content starts and where your content ends. Let's write this out. So we want to do the less than sign again, and we're going to write HTML. And now that I've opened it, I need to close it immediately. To close it, we do another less than sign or angle bracket, and as soon as I hit the slash key, it's immediately going to close it. Sublime Text knows that we have an open tag that needs to be closed. So let's stop here for a second and talk about the anatomy of an HTML element. Almost every HTML element has an opening tag and a closing tag. So the opening tag is represented by angle brackets, a less than sign, and a greater than sign with the tag name. And to close it, it's essentially the same thing as the opening tag, but to close it, we add a slash in front of the tag name. So this indicates that we are closing this element. Inside here goes our content. So if this is our website, content goes here. So just to clarify, an HTML element is comprised of an opening tag and a closing tag and any attributes, which we'll talk about in a later video, on the element. So when we talk about an element, we're talking about an opening tag and a closing tag. When we talk about HTML tags, we're talking about specifically an open tag or a closing tag. But the element refers to both the opening and the closing tag. And I should highlight, just because it can be a bit confusing, when I'm talking about an HTML element, that doesn't necessarily mean the current example, which uses the tag name HTML. There are other HTML elements, such as the body element, or the paragraph element, or the heading element. It's just that the example we're using right now is the HTML element itself. So a best practice note, anytime you open a tag, immediately close it. This is something that developers forget to do many years into their careers. Let's do it again one more time. I'm going to do the angle bracket, HTML, and I am going to immediately close the tag. So here's our opening tag, and here's our closing tag. So the next structural requirement is what we call the head. The head wraps all your metadata. It's data about data for your website. This is where you're going to put your styles, maybe some JavaScript files, potentially linking some external fonts, a title tag, a description tag, stuff we're going to get into. But just know that the head tag is data about data. And with a few exceptions, nothing in the head is actually seen by the end user. We're going to go back to our HTML page and we're going to write out head. And immediately we're going to close our head. And I'm going to put a space. Now there is a shortcut for tags. So up until now, I have been doing angle bracket and writing out the element name. But if you go angle bracket and type the word H, you can see here already we have a multitude of options that we can choose from. So I'm going to write E, and here we see header and head. So I can arrow up on the keyboard, and now that head is highlighted, I'm just going to hit the tab key. And you can see that it completes the opening tag and automatically creates the closing tag for us. So let's do it one more time. We're going to write HEA, and that's it. You don't have to hit tab, you can also just hit enter. So if I go HE and then hit enter, it also finishes the opening and creates the closing tag. And I'm going to hit return again to create another space. So now we've created our head, which is nested inside of our HTML tags. So as we go through this course, we're going to be populating more and more elements inside of our head. But for right now, we're just going to put in what we call the title tag. So if I go back to Sublime, inside the head, I'm going to write the word title, and we can see title already comes up, and I'm going to tab for autocomplete. And I'm going to write the title of this page, which is My First Web Page. And I'm going to save this. Whatever you write inside your title tag is what the user will see when they look at the tab in their browser. So now let's test this out and see if our title tag is actually showing. There are a few ways that you can open up your HTML page in the browser. The first way is to put your cursor right here over the icon, click, and drag it down to your web browser. And you can see My First Web Page is working. Let's just change it one more time. We'll say My First Website. Hit save, come back and refresh the page, and you can see it has changed to My First Website. So another way to do this is if we go to our desktop, we can also double click on index.html, and now you can see that also opens it in the web browser. And if I'm in here, I can also right click on the page and hit open in browser. So there's numerous ways that you can open your HTML page in the web browser. Let's move back to the next structural requirement, which is the body tag. So the body element wraps all the content you want your users to see. This is going to be things like text, videos, audio, sliders, galleries. Everything that you see on a web page is going to be nested inside of the body element. So let's go back to our code. And after head, we're going to write body, and autocomplete is there, so I'm just going to hit enter, and it creates the body tags for me, the opening and the closing tags. I'm going to put my cursor here and just crack this open because we're going to be putting quite a lot of content inside of our body tag. So the last thing that we're going to talk about in this video is formatting. Formatting is extremely important. Formatting allows you to easily look at your code and identify issues. Formatting helps to keep things clean. So for formatting, we want to put a single line space between all of our tags. So you can see here that I'm already violating the formatting rule. So I'm going to delete that space, and we want to indent by either 2 or 4 spaces. I personally like 4 spaces. You may like 2. The industry best practices are either 2 or 4. So to choose how many spaces you would like to indent, you just come down here, and where you see spaces, mine already says tab width 4. If you would like to do 2, select 2, and then highlight all of your head content and hit tab. And that now indents it 2 spaces. I'm going to highlight everything again and hit shift tab to bring it back. And I'm going to change this to 4 spaces, because for me 4 spaces is a lot cleaner. And I'm going to select my head again and the content within it and hit tab. And now we have a 4-space indent. Now the title is also a nested element of the head. So we want our title to also be indented. So I'm going to click here and hit tab. Now the body tags are not nested elements of our head, but they are nested of the HTML. So we want to select our body tags and hit tab again. And now our body tag is indented 4 spaces. So we talked before about the need for a code editor. If you click on HTML, you can see automatically that the end tag is highlighted. This is one of the beautiful things about having a good code editor. It shows you where your opening, where your closing tag falls. And because things are indented cleanly, it is very easy to see them line up. So if I click on the head, now I see where the closing tag for the head is. Title shows me the closing tag, and the body. In the next video, we'll talk about HTML attributes.